Everyone. We are in the middle of American Education Week, so it's only fitting that we're holding an educational webinar today. We're going to be talking about the embodied carbon that it takes to build homes. Now, that amount is actually much greater than the carbon emitted from our operations. Our guest today has learned some hard lessons from his extensive experience on the front lines of both zero energy ready homes and the implementation of embodied carbon reduction strategies. And that guest would be the esteemed Gene Myers of Thrive Home Builders. Gene and his company are 6-time winners of the Department of Energy's Grant Award for Innovation and the first production builder to deliver solar standard homes, build net zero communities, and use Colorado beetle kill lumber in the construction of their homes. Now, we couldn't bring this great education to you without our sponsors. The first is Schneider Electric, who is driving the digital transformation of modern homes with the smart and sustainable energy solutions for ultimate comfort and energy efficiency. Their connected home ecosystem of smart energy management solutions provides digital control of energy use throughout a home, from the grid via their smart electrical panel to their connected wiring devices. This grid-to-plug solution makes it significantly easier to create smart solar power and backup power-ready homes, both now and in the future. Next is Panasonic Healthy Indoor Living Solutions. They're helping builders across the country differentiate themselves with powerful, code-compliant, and cost-effective indoor air quality solutions that provide a safer environment for homebuyers. Jinko Solar is a leading PV module manufacturer and energy storage system integrator. The company has deployed more than 100 gigawatts of their Eagle modules in 160 countries globally, including more than 17 gigawatts right here in the United States. Eagle Storage brings together the best energy storage technology for turnkey hardware and energy storage services. Eagle is a trusted choice for U.S. solar and storage projects. And our newest sponsor this year is LG HVAC. As a leading proponent of the electrification movement, LG is proud to pave the way with arguably the broadest portfolio of home electrification products. From air-to-air and air-to-water heat pumps for HVAC, water heaters, clothes dryers, and washer-dryer combos, to advanced energy storage systems, EV chargers, and super efficient appliances, including the industry's first Energy Star certified induction cooktop. LG's innovation and technology will help us promote decarbonization and collectively create a better life for all. Now, during the course of today's presentation, you could submit questions for Gene. Simply use the questions box inside the GoToWebinar control panel. I'll review those questions and pose them to Gene after his presentation. All right, Gene, I am looking forward to the education today.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Gene Myers. I'm in Denver today. It's a beautiful day. I am fighting a cold, so I hope you'll forgive my scratchy voice. I'm armed with my tea to try to make it through, and so I hope you find this presentation interesting. So just a little bit about Thrive. I started Thrive back in 1992. And we've been doing workforce housing, affordable housing, zero energy homes, and healthy homes all through that career. We built our company on several legs of our brand. The first is efficient. By that, we mean energy efficiency. Mike, I should update the introduction. We picked up our 14th Grant Award for Housing Innovation at the last EBA conference over the last 11 years. And so we're a big proponent of the Zero Energy Ready Home program and a very strong proponent of all of the federal programs and the support that they give builders like us to build high performance homes. Healthy is another leg of our brand. The EPA's Indoor Air Plus program has been a really important part of Thrive. When we started it back in probably 2013, it seemed like particularly our competitors were kind of scratching their heads. What does health have to do with the home? And then the pandemic hit and we looked like geniuses. Well, we're not geniuses, but the EPA Indoor Air Plus program really is a great program that you can explain to customers really well. And if we have the capacity as builders to build homes that make our residents healthier, we feel like we have an obligation to do that. Local is another leg of our brand. I have a friend who has a tomato grow house. One of the few grow houses in Denver that aren't being used for some other purpose, I'm afraid to say. But he grows tomatoes for Whole Foods. And I asked him, so they're organic? And he said, no, they're local. Whole Foods customers really care about local. So we grabbed onto that, believing our customers care about that. Our market is really dominated by large national builders. And so this has been a big point of differentiation. Mike mentioned in the intro that we use pine beetle kill lumber in our houses. This beetle kill epidemic is a real deal out here in the West. There's a prediction out there that there won't be a single living lodgepole pine left in the state by the time this has run its course. And so we came up with this graphic and asked, is there anything good that can come from that? And yeah, we can build homes out of trees that have already died. We can renew our watersheds. We can take fuel out of the forest and mitigate wildfire risk, and our customers love that. Green Builder Magazine, our presenter today, has honored us as Green Home of the Year, and really appreciate all the support we've gotten over the years. I remember a few years back, they named me a superhero, and I'm no superhero, as you can tell from my voice, but green is another important aspect of our brand. Resilient has taken on more importance, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the presentation, but it's really interesting. We in the West have been faced with wildfires and wildfire risks, smoke impacts, especially during the summer. It's interesting to me that now the Northeast is really feeling it. Even New York City's had some really bad air days. And so we think that this resiliency with respect to fire risk is really important. And it's become a more important part of our brand. Speaking of smoke, I think during the pandemic, during the lockdown, we had a really kind of an infamous day on August 7th of 2021 when Denver had the worst air pollution in the world. And it wasn't even from anything we did. It was from smoke from the West Coast. And I remember sitting in my office, which had a mountain view, and the mountains weren't there. We were in the middle of the lockdown, and I thought, well, at least here in Colorado, we can get outside, and then we couldn't because of the smoke. And it really made me start to reevaluate what should we really be focused on going forward. And one way to describe it would be we've been focused on the health of our customers for a long time, but it really hit me hard that we can't really have healthy customers if we're not living on a healthy planet. And so we started to pivot towards addressing climate change. And over these last several years have come up with our own climate action plan as a small builder. We all know we've just been through an interesting election cycle here in the US. And I think it's important to just recognize that climate change is real. It's the science, and we look at those CO2 levels. It's been hard for me to understand personally what that all means. And there's a website you can go to, and you can kind of get that CO2 perspective over your own lifetime. I'm 73. I was born in 1951. And the day I was born, there were 312 parts per million of CO2. And today there's 422. It's interesting that over that 73-year span, it's gone up a little over 100 parts per million. The previous 73-year span, it only increased 22 parts per million. So we can see that this is increasing rapidly. But I really try to think, well, then what's it going to be like for my granddaughter, Alma? When I was born, 312 parts per million. When she was born, 422 parts per million. When she's my age, according to NOAA, the range could be in the 800 to 1,000 parts per million. And what will that world be like? I'm a home builder. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a climate scientist. I don't know what it'll be like, but my suspicion is it can't be good, and that we really ought to be doing all we can to mitigate that. So why is our industry as home builders important? In terms of energy use, the residential sector accounts for 22% of energy use, and for emissions, about 17% of emissions. And when I think about, regardless of what our new administration does with respect to the Paris Agreement, there's no way that we'll reach any of those goals, those carbon reduction goals, without our industry participating, because we're such a big player. And so it seems as an imperative for our industry to try to start to figure this out. In Colorado, the evidence of climate change is all around us. I mentioned that beetle kill epidemic. In Rocky Mountain National Park, this is a national park. It's supposed to be pristine. The entire west portal is dead. Our cities in Colorado have approved climate action plans without state leadership and without federal leadership. And, you know, I really believe that regardless of what the federal policy is in this next administration, many of us will be dealing with local issues, local control. And we builders all know that we're a highly regulated industry, and that regulation is really coming from local government. I love the tagline on the Sustainable BREC plan for Breckenridge, Colorado, sustaining what we love. And for me, that's very much about what drives me and drives all of us here at Thrive, is to really sustain this beautiful state where we live. One of our major projects is in Denver, Colorado. It's now not permitted to actually heat a home with natural gas in Colorado, in Denver. And you can see the goals of being 100% renewable by 2030. In Fort Collins, where we also build, they have a 100% carbon reduction or carbon neutrality goal by 2050 and 80% by 2030. I think, to make my point, when the prior Trump administration pulled out of the Paris Agreement, 407 US mayors signed on to it. And so there's a really good chance that wherever you're building, you may be faced with these regardless of the direction that the federal administration goes. But even more important, I believe our customers expect our homes to be part of the solution. Here in the West, we're in the midst of a 1,200-year drought. We have more numerous and intense wildfires. I've mentioned this pine beetle epidemic. Our degrading air quality in the summer is a real factor affecting our quality of life. And when I encounter someone locally here that questions whether or not climate change is real, I ask them what their insurance company thinks about that. Colorado now has the third highest home insurance rates in the country, behind Florida and Texas, even higher than California. And so this is a reality that we must deal with. But as a small builder, what can you really do? And our thought was that we can leverage our expertise that we've gained in these federal programs for energy efficiency and health in the home, and then do what we can to really do our part to address climate change. In 2023, we published our first ESG report. We hired a consultant and we followed kind of the corporate ESG orthodoxy, tracking the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And honestly, it was kind of a tedious process. And after it was all over, I kind of had to ask myself the question, was it worth it? And I think it was worth it because it gave us a perspective to really focus on what matters. But honestly, for a company like Thrive, wading through a lot of the detail of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, much of the social and governance content was insignificant compared to the real impact. And what was the impact? What we learned from our first ESG report, that our total corporate footprint, which is what most ESG reports are about, is the equivalent of only 2 of the homes we built that year. And so that conclusion down at the bottom of the slide is really our takeaway, that if builders are serious about addressing climate change, what matters most is the carbon footprint of the homes we build, not whether or not we clicked all the boxes on an ESG report. So for our 2024 sustainability report, we're focused on what we think matters most. First, we do have a corporate footprint, and we're taking the work of our consultant and applying that to future years so that we can at least take into account our corporate footprint. We then need to calculate the embodied carbon of the homes we build, add that to the operational carbon, and come up with what our total footprint is. And for our 24 report, we're basically taking the entire fleet of homes that we delivered in 2023 and calculating that total footprint and putting it out there as a benchmark for us to work towards reducing in the future. I'm going to take a break here. Hang on a second. So what we learned in our ESG report is that about 1.25 metric tons per 1,000 square feet of every home we deliver is our corporate footprint. And so we're just going to prorate that over the number of homes delivered in 2023. We delivered 71 homes. Our average HERS score on those homes was 25. And so we began to calculate the embodied carbon of the homes we built. We've had a great partner in the University of Denver. Our thanks to Eric Holt in the Franklin Burns School of Real Estate and Construction Management. He's had a team of grad students that have worked to calculate the footprint of our entire fleet of houses. And for those of you who aren't that familiar with embodied carbon, it's the footprint of a building before it becomes operational. So think of it as all the carbon emissions associated with producing all the parts and pieces of a house. So first, we need to know what's in our homes. We start with the bill of materials, and we've been using the MyTech software. MyTech is a big company in the component manufacturing world. They have 3D modeling of homes, and from that we can get an automated bill of materials. We then repurpose that software with the bill of materials, and we enter that into, along with the environmental product declarations of all those pieces and parts, add them up, and we end up with the embodied carbon. This is about to get a lot simpler. ResNet and the whole rating industry is working on an embodied carbon index. It's likely not to be as granular, at least at the beginning, as this exercise that we've gone through with the University of Denver, but it is going to be something that will be included in every energy rating that you get for an energy rated home. And so to me, that's what the industry needs, is a really simple way to at least benchmark. If it's not totally accurate, I don't think it matters. At least it's a benchmark that we can then compare home to home, builder to builder, and year to year as we track our progress on embodied carbon. University of Denver entered that bill of materials into one-click LCA. They had previously done a study that is now published on the Green Builder Media website, evaluating 6 or 7 different carbon calculating platforms. and asked the question, which one of those platforms is really most appropriate for a builder, and landed on One-Click LCA. So for our total fleet of homes that we delivered in 2023, we're at 4,700 metric tons. And here's some rough metrics that you might be able to use on the homes that you build. Our average single family house had about 180 metric tons of CO2. And then our townhomes, about a fourth of that, or about 40 metric tons of CO2. And so there's some round numbers that you could use even without going through all of the calculations. The next step then is the operational carbon, the amount of carbon emitted from the energy used to operate the building. And that includes all that list that you see on the slide, particularly heating, cooling, lighting, and so on. And that is also getting much easier to calculate. Now included in every HERS rating that you get on your homes is a HERS carbon index. And I don't think it's being utilized by very many builders. My thanks to Steve Byers and his company, Energy Logic, who really helped us dissect the energy ratings on all of the homes that we delivered in 2023 to begin to add up what is that HERS carbon index. Here's an example of the sample output. And the real numbers that you could use would be that our average single family operational carbon is about 2 metric tons per year. Our average operational carbon for a townhouse is 2.5. And that may seem not intuitive, especially since the embodied carbon of a single family house was about over 4 times the embodied carbon of the townhouse. The reason is that we have a lot more solar on the roofs for our single family than we do on our townhouses. And so there's less of an offset of the energy being utilized in the home with on-site generation. So that's the explanation for that. A lot of times you'll see a graph a little bit like this, where you'll see embodied carbon that it starts off at a number and just stays flat over time because it doesn't change over time. And then we have the operational carbon that's growing, in our case, at about 170 metric tons per year for our entire 2023 fleet. And you see them crossing over in about 25 years. And I think that's an unusually long time frame, just because as a high performance builder, our operational carbon is much lower than a code built house would be. So typically you would see that crossover much sooner. And that's why a lot of the focus has been on operational carbon versus embodied carbon, on the theory that it never stops, and that maybe over time embodied carbon is more de minimis, but that's really not true for a high performance builder. One way of looking at it is that our embodied carbon has a carbon debt of about 25 years based on the operational carbon of the homes that we build. Now, we could do a carbon offset to offset this impact of our entire fleet. Green Builder Media has a great partner in carbon offsets and carbon credits with CNOT. The current rate per metric ton of an offset is $12 a metric ton. So one way of looking at this is that for a total dollar volume in the $30 to $40 million range for 2023, we could offset the total embodied carbon for about $56,000. Now, if you're not familiar with what an offset is, it's really a certificate representing a project that is doing good for the environment, like maybe reforestation of those beetle killed forests. And they can sell that carbon benefit to people who have a carbon debt. And so that's that there is a worldwide carbon market for this, and that's the market that CNOT's in. And so if you have an interest in offsetting a house, or if a buyer has an interest in offsetting their footprint for a house, you can go on to the CNOT website and purchase a carbon offset. So where are we headed? Well, we did have a great vision home that we did with Green Builder Media in 2023 with our Saunders project. This is the project that we did our very first carbon offset on and first carbon calculation on. I was taken aback when we did the bill of materials for this house. It has 19,000 pieces and parts. It's not realistic for the industry to really go to that level of detail on every home that we build. And so I really welcome the work that's being done by ResNet to come up with a simple embodied carbon index that can be included with every HERS rating. This next slide is of our Loretto townhomes. These are geared towards first-time home buyers. This is that 14th Grand Award winner for Housing Innovation for Best Overall. We did purchase an offset for this townhome, and which made this townhome carbon neutral. We have another project, Panorama House up in Breckenridge, Colorado. We've experimented with using a fiberglass foundation, which has a much lower footprint than a concrete foundation. Concrete has like the biggest carbon debt of just about any material that we builders use. It features double walls we prefabbed, roof trusses, wall panels, and floor cassettes on this house. The home is a net zero energy home. It's all electric, fire resilient. It's carbon neutral. So from an operational carbon standpoint, with net zero energy as a result of our on-site generation, that's kind of by definition operationally carbon neutral. And then we calculated the footprint on this with the help of MyTech and purchased an offset through CNOT to make it carbon neutral. It is a DOE zero energy ready home and also an EPA Indoor Air Plus home. It's interesting, we were building this house up in Breckenridge, and not this past summer, but summer before last, I got a call from the Breckenridge chief building official who wanted to come out and learn what we were doing. I then had an opportunity to present to the town of Breckenridge how we were reducing carbon, and I was asked if I thought we could actually do a carbon neutral housing for a workforce housing project in the town of Breckenridge. This is a 61 unit project of single family duplex and triplex homes. They are net zero energy, carbon neutral, DOE zero energy ready. And it is interesting on the carbon offset for this project that we discussed with the town what we were doing with buying offsets. And what they've asked is that we calculate what that offset would cost and contribute that to a local carbon offset fund that they can use for expanding solar energy or whatever other carbon offsetting projects that they have locally. And I like that idea of local carbon offsets that are managed to the benefit of the local community. And I think it also has a lot of resonance with customers. We've just been selected for another Breckenridge project, about 150 units of single family duplex and triplex homes. Again, the goal is net zero energy, carbon neutrality. And I should say that for Panorama House, for the Stables project, and for Runway, if we can get to net zero energy and carbon neutrality in climate zone 7, which is the toughest climate zone in the continental US, I believe builders can do this anywhere. And so I honestly thought when I was going down the rabbit hole a little bit on what we could do for carbon reduction, that it could be years before we could monetize this for our business. And yet I'm pleased to report that with Stables and Runway, that we actually have business opportunities opening up to us because we are a builder that can help a municipality reach their climate action goals. And if you're a builder like us, we're always looking for those niches where we can play where maybe the big builders don't play. And this has turned out to be an important opportunity for our company. I'd like to close out with a couple of slides that some of you may have seen from some of our previous presentations. But this was just kind of a seminal moment for me in our decision to turn towards moving to carbon neutrality as a builder. The Marshall Fire was a disaster that happened basically in New Year's Day in 2022. This was a wildfire that wiped out over 1,000 homes in the Denver metro area. Here in Colorado, we're accustomed to wildfires, but they're supposed to be happening in the forests. They're not supposed to be happening where you have a fire hydrant in front of your house. And yet, because of climate change, one can wonder, is anywhere really safe? And I wonder if that's what people in the Northeast are thinking right now, as the state of Massachusetts has fought over 500 wildfires in the month of October. And so as we were watching the news coverage of this, someone in our company just took a picture of their TV screen. So I apologize for the poor quality of this photo, but our homes are the ones with the white gables. And you can see that the fire just stopped when it got to our homes. We had about 30 homes in the path of the Marshall Fire, and we didn't lose a single one. And so for me, it really answers the question, what can a small builder do in the face of climate change? Well, we're certainly not going to stop climate change, but maybe we can save someone's home, or 20 of those homes are occupied. Maybe we can save someone's life. And at the end of the day, my conclusion was that at least on that day, the front line in the battle of against climate change was the center line of that street. And our line held. And so if you're a builder wondering what you can do, well, if we can do it, anyone can do it. We're a small builder. We don't have an R&D department. There was me and an intern wrote our ESG report. And now we're just using our HERS reports and our partners to help us calculate operational carbon and embodied carbon. I hope as early as next year, all we'll need is a HERS report to calculate both of them. I hope you'll ask yourself the question, what can you do in the face of climate change? I hope this story will help you on your own journey, and appreciate your attending today. And Mike, I'll turn this back to you.
Thank you very much, Gene. Appreciate it very much. And I put out the call in the chat for any questions that anybody might have for Gene. And a couple people have sent some things in. I obviously have a question for you as well, Gene. And so with that, I kind of want to dig in. I'll let our guests go first. So the first question I've got is from Bo. Are you familiar, and I know that you are, but are you familiar or working with the passive house concept? So let's start there, because he's got a couple different questions. So let's start there. Your comments on passive house.
Well, it's interesting. I was sharing before the presentation with Mike and Mary that we're moving our office. And so we're in the middle of an office move, and I was packing things up and ran across my Passive House consultant certification. And so, yes, I am familiar with Passive House and admire the energy efficiency of passive houses. So I am familiar with it. And, I'll just kind of give you the conclusion that as a production home builder, where we ended up on Passive House. There's a tipping point in the energy efficiency of a home where you're spending more to gain additional energy efficiency than it would cost to just put another kilowatt of solar on the roof. And we found that tipping point has been about a HERS 40. And so an example would be that Panorama House without solar has a HERS of 37. Now, in our judgment, it was cheaper to just add the solar than it was to continue down the Passive House route to get incrementally lower and lower energy usage. And so that's a value judgment that we've made of just optimizing the cost to get to zero. I hope that helps whoever asked that question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the answer on that. And then an additional question was asked about, are you aware or familiar with, or have you seen a certain type of concrete being used in North America yet? What type of concrete, you ask? Cement-free, alkali-activated geopolymer concrete. Have you run across anything like that at all?
I have, well, I am aware of several efforts to reduce the embodied carbon of concrete. I'm not familiar with the geopolymer product that the questioner referred to. In many cases, what's being done is that the cement is being replaced by a byproduct, a manufacturing byproduct like fly ash from a coal-fired power plant. And I applaud all of the efforts to try to reduce the embodied carbon of concrete. But at the end of the day, if we're relying on a fossil fuel power plant to produce a byproduct to help us lower the carbon debt of concrete, it seems like there's kind of a problem with that. And so, again, I applaud all efforts being made. I will tell you that we could not obtain low carbon concrete in Breckenridge. There was no supplier for it. We talked with people in the metro area. They wouldn't deliver it. And so I hope that it becomes much more widespread. And any advances that can be made on reducing the footprint of concrete are huge for the future of carbon reduction in our industry.
All right. I had a question from Dale. Wanted to know if you could re-mention either the group or the professor at the University of Denver that helped with the initial embodied carbon accounting.
I would love to. I'd like to do an advertisement for them. So the individual is Eric Holt. They call him a professor of the practice in the Franklin Burns School of Real Estate and Construction Management. They have been so generous and so committed to helping us on our journey of calculating embodied carbon. I really would refer you to the Green Builder Media website, where their study that they did a year or so ago for us is published for everyone to use, where they basically took the same house, ran it through, I believe, 7 different carbon calculating platforms, evaluated ease of use, accuracy. And oh, by the way, I need to tell you that you can get widely different conclusions from these different platforms. And it's kind of disheartening that we're not to the point where we can all agree on what yardstick to use to measure our progress. But at the end of the day, that's what I think the HERS carbon, embodied carbon index is about. Again, you can get wildly variable results from different platforms. If we can just settle on a platform and then measure our performance against that as an index, I think it's a huge step forward for the industry. But my hat's off to Eric Holt and to his grad students that have helped us these last several years in calculating embodied carbon.
Bring a smile to your face, Gene. Our friend Mike Barsick is saying, hey, thanks for your inspiration and commitment. Get well soon.
Thank you, Mike.
Question from Robert. He'd like to hear a little bit more about how the fiberglass foundation works.
Well, it's really interesting. It's a proprietary system. You can Google the epitome, that's EPITOME, foundation system, and up will come a company in Wisconsin that fabricates it. It is a kind of a use of a product designed for a different purpose. So there's this extrusion process in Elkhart, Indiana, that has a fiberglass skin on both sides of an EPS foam panel. And you can almost think of it as a fiberglass SIPS panel. That continuously extruded panel is used in the recreational vehicle industry. And so they take that extrusion, ship it up to their plant in Wisconsin, and they glue hollow fiberglass 2x4 stiffeners to that. So you end up with a panel that's about 2.5 inches thick of foam with rigid fiberglass on each side, the stiffener that's on 16-inch centers. In the case of Panorama House, we just put a typical R19 bat into that cavity created in the stiffeners and ended up with an R40 foundation wall assembly. On that house, it's a stem wall for a crawl space. And in climate zone 7, you want that to be insulated well. It's inherently airtight, it's waterproof, and went in about 2 days. I will tell you a funny story. A building inspector came out to do the inspection on the foundation. He comes out, he kind of gets out of his pickup, he goes into our construction trailer, looks at the plans, gets his clipboard out, walks back out the door, stands up and looks at our foundation, turns to me and says, I have no idea what I'm looking at. And so we went back into the trailer, and there were a lot of references on the notes to install per manufacturer's recommendation. I said, how do I know you did that? And I said, well, the manufacturer's right outside. Why don't you go ask them? So I was supremely happy that the people from Epitome came out to install that. And I think that, you know, with any new innovation, you end up needing to get on an educational process with your consultants. The structural engineer had to get comfortable with it, with the building inspectors. And yet I do think that's how we move the industry forward. I would do that foundation again.
Another question from Bo. Are bio-based insulation materials such as hempcrete, are they catching on at all? Are they becoming easier to acquire or obtain?
Well, I don't have a lot of direct experience with it. I was out at Penn State a couple of weeks ago where they've done a lot of work with hempcrete and with hemp insulation. What we chose to use on Panorama House is a blown fiberglass. We use the Owens Corning product because they did the biggest power purchase agreement, at least in history at the time, and they've offset the emissions associated with all of their fiberglass production in North America. And so without having to find a different supplier, develop a different supply chain, again, get on that educational curve with inspectors and subcontractors and so on, we're able to get a very low footprint product using a very conventional material.
Gotcha. All right, I'm going to ask you a question, Gene, because I'm curious and I love when we have our conversations and the insight you share. And I'll give you a moment to also let you rest your vocal cords. You cited early in the presentation, you cited agreements and resolutions, ordinances that have been passed or approved by 400 and some mayors or entities. And I think that's created some strong commitments to sustainability, but it also has created a bit of a patchwork for an entity like a national home builder. With the short-term outlook seemingly de-emphasizing sustainability at the national level, is there anything in your mind, Gene, to motivate national builders to do this type of self-examination?
Well, I think your observation is correct, Mike, and we deal with the patchwork problem all the time. Here in Colorado, we don't even have a statewide building code. All we have to do is cross the city limit line, and we could be working on the 2021 code or even as far back as the 2015 code. And so this patchwork is a problem, even for a small builder like us. But as you asked the question about a national builder, I've never worked for a national builder, but I know a lot of them. And it does strike me that their division presidents, their regional presidents have a lot of autonomy. And I know that some builders that may be based here in Denver and operate in California, they may have a division president in California that is very progressive. And why would that happen? I think it happens because this is actually a local business. Our customers are hyper local. Even our economics, if you're building in California where there may be a solar mandate or other, I think it's called Title 24 requirements, you can't be just like every other division in your national building company. And so I think the motivation would be the drive locally and regionally on what the customer expects and what's appropriate for their market. I would like to say, and I'm not sure what I'm about to say is true, but I would like to say that there is brand building potential for any builder who would adopt these kind of standards. And a person who comes to mind is Jacob Atala at KB Home. I have great respect for Jacob. And he was able to get Energy Star as a standard nationwide for their company. And it's not a patchwork within their company. I think within a lot of national builders, each region is kind of a patchwork, or each division president is kind of a patchwork. And so I admire these national builders that will look at the situation and say, this is the right thing to do. We're seeing more and more of that. At the last EBA summit in October, Joel Abney from Woodside Homes came over to me and said, you know, I think in this room, there are representatives of builders that build 300,000 homes a year that are here to learn how to build high performance homes better. And those included D.R. Horton was in the room, Pulte was in the room, Beazer was in the room, Taylor Morrison was in the room. And so even though I think it presents a big challenge, Mike, with this patchwork, and it would be a lot better with a consistent federal policy, there are big national builders that are focusing on this, and I look forward to their continued adoption of high performance building practices. I think the 45L tax credit had a lot to do with the interest that we saw this past year at the EBA Summit in the big builders, and I'm hopeful that that tax credit will remain in place. I believe it in the legislation. It has a life of 10 years, and so we'll just have to see how durable that is.
Yeah, we will see how long that survives, if it makes it all the way to the 10-year mark or something else happens in the interim. But Tiffany wanted to make sure to share with you, Gene, that obviously her thanks, but also that the Lower Sioux tribe in Minnesota, they've done a lot of work to grow and process hemp so they can build with it. And she's a proponent of using it as a building material because it is naturally moisture, insect, and fire resistant. So just a quick plug for hemp as a potential building material. So wanted to share that with you. And
well, I think that the embodied carbon calculation on that would be pretty interesting because it's probably embodied carbon positive that could be utilized to actually offset the footprint of some of your other materials. So I think there is great potential in these innovative products.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I don't have any other questions or compliments for you, Gene, other than it's always good to hang out with you. We really do appreciate you being here. Thank you for sharing some time and insight with us and stretching your voice to the limits. We do very much appreciate weathering through this, and we hope that the move goes well here real soon.
Thanks so much, Mike. I appreciate all you guys at Green Builder, and thank you for all you do for the industry.
We try our best, and so thankfully we get to work with people like you, and that makes it a lot easier. So, but we also get to hang out with this wonderful audience. Thank all of you for attending and asking the wonderful questions that you do, and we very much do appreciate the compliments that you send our way. And thank you once again to Schneider Electric, Panasonic Healthy Indoor Living Solutions, Jinko Solar, and LG HVAC for their sponsorships. All right, we have one final webinar in 2024. Cue the trumpets. It is the annual State of the Industry event with Green Builder Media CEO Sarah Gutterman. That is going to take place on Wednesday, December 4th at our usual start time of 2 p.m. Eastern. I will be joining her to host that, but she will be the one with all the wonderful insights and information. So please make sure you register for that. Again, that is just 2 weeks away. Thanks again for attending, and I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving next week. And if you're not located in the U.S., then enjoy a random weekday with American football games played all day long, I guess. Regardless, stay safe, stay healthy, and take care, everyone. So long.